Struggling to navigate the complexities of clinical trials? From cultural sensitivities to regulatory hurdles, managing trials in diverse regions can be overwhelming. Welcome, clinical trial professionals. I'm Ayana with Achibo Clinical, and today I'm excited to introduce you to the African Clinical Trials Navigator, your AI-powered solution for overcoming the challenges of conducting successful trials across the continent. In this video, we'll explore how this tool can simplify everything, from regulatory submissions to participant recruitment, while keeping you compliant with local and national guidelines. By the end, you'll see how this tool can revolutionize your trial management, making every step, from ethical reviews to patient engagement, more efficient and culturally appropriate. Stick around and don't miss the chance to unlock the full potential of the African Clinical Trials Navigator. Ready to make trial management across Africa a breeze? Let's dive in.
Hello everyone, welcome to another GPT tutorial with Achibo Clinical. Today we're going to review the African Clinical Trials Navigator. It is a multilingual guide for clinical trials in Africa with cultural insights, local trends, recruitment and compliance alerts. If you haven't met me before, I am Tengu Muna. I'm the founder of Achibo Clinical, and I'm delighted to share this tool that I created for you incredible clinical researchers on the African continent. This tool is available in multiple languages. I'm going to start with a question, and then we're going to refine it further to see what type of responses that we will get. Our first question is related to patient recruitment, and it is: what strategies can I use to recruit participants for clinical trials in African countries? And there it goes. You can leverage local community engagement, work with community leaders, community meetings and outreach, use local healthcare workers. It talks about cultural sensitivity and awareness and how to tailor your communication culturally. You can always take each section and dive even deeper. But again, I prepared all these questions just to give you a brief overview of how best to use this tool. Those are some of the responses that we're getting from our African Clinical Trials Navigator, and I will stop it here. To refine it further, let's go into the next question, which is: what culturally sensitive strategies can I use to recruit participants for a clinical trial in rural Kenya where there's a lack of trust in clinical research? And let's see how it can help us to do that. We'll go ahead and pop it in here. It asks you to engage and collaborate with community leaders. And as we know, that's extremely important. It also talks about conduct community information sessions, address mistrust head-on, transparency about the study, the informed consent process, and then, of course, incorporate local beliefs and practices. And there's so much more, engaging through trusted local institutions. We'll stop then again. If you need additional information, you can pick a section and dive deeper. And then let's go to the next section. The question that I prepared here is navigating ethical reviews. How do I navigate the ethical review process for clinical trials in Africa? That's a very general question because, as we know, there's several countries involved here. So let's see what the response is. We have to understand national and regional regulatory requirements. And then it gives you examples of local and regulatory authorities. Engage local ethics committees early, prepare culturally sensitive and compliant documents. And of course, there's so much more. Usually it would give you about 10 to 12 responses, but we'll stop it right here. Now, let's go ahead and refine this question further. It is: what are the best practices for submitting ethical review documents in South Africa, ensuring adherence to national and local standards? Let's copy that and pop it into our African Clinical Trials Navigator, and let's see what it has for us for South Africa. It gives you a lot of details. It talks about the SAPRA and GCPs and the local ethics, and really a step-by-step guide for South Africa. What I love about this is that it gives you all the details that you need, and all you have to do is grab this. You can ask it to create a checklist for you as well. So that works really well. So that's question number 2. Let's move on to question number 3, which is regulatory compliance across African nations. My initial question was, how do I ensure regulatory compliance when conducting trials across multiple African countries? And if you're a sponsor or CRO, this is a good one for you. And let's go ahead and ask that. We have to understand and comply with country-specific regulations. And then it gives you an example of all the different regulatory authorities for the countries that we are reviewing for this tutorial, harmonized with regional regulatory frameworks. What I want to add is it can be a little bit challenging when we're submitting for several countries. It just makes it easier, especially for someone who is on the regulatory team, who's doing all these submissions. It makes it easier to understand what the requirements are per country, and definitely helps with the timelines. So that is the question. Let's move on to the next one, which is, how can I ensure consistent compliance when conducting a multi-country clinical trial across Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana, each with different regulations? Let's grab that and put it in here. And then, of course, it goes through each country and what is actually required. And then you can even dive deeper. You can have it create a checklist and steps for submissions in Nigeria or Kenya or Ghana. And everything is detailed. It's really going to be up to you in terms of what you really want out of this tool, because it can answer all the questions for you. Again, to get the best responses, you have to keep refining the prompt to get to what you actually want. These are the regulatory requirements for those countries. And then, of course, it provides other strategies that you can implement. Our next section is question number 4, which is the retention of participants in rural areas. The general question is, what can I do to retain participants in clinical trials? And then it's going to give us some suggestions here. Build trust and rapport early, simplify participation and minimize burden, provide incentives and compensation. Those are some of the things that you can implement. And then let's refine this further. How can I improve participant retention in a long-term clinical trial based in a remote rural area of Ethiopia, where participants face transportation challenges? And let's grab our question and put it in here. So it tells you, organize transportation, mobile clinics, reimburse travel costs, leverage local health workers, community health workers, and health extension workers, flexible follow-up strategies, home visits, remote monitoring. So it gives you all of that. And then, of course, cultural sensitivity and community engagement is essential as well. And then let's stop that there. And we are going to move on to the next section, which is site selection on the African continent. How do I select the best sites for clinical trials in Africa? And let's pop it in here. Here we go. Target population, the prevalence of study condition, diverse population representation, participant access and retention, number 1. And then, of course, we have to evaluate health care infrastructure, hospital and clinic capacity, on-site lab services, IT and data collection capability. And this is because we'll need to work around that. In a section where you are a sponsor, CRO wanting to conduct a study somewhere in Africa, and you're evaluating the healthcare infrastructure, you can take each one and dig deeper and get a list of the hospitals and clinics that have the capacity to actually conduct clinical trials. That's it for that one. And let's go ahead and ask a more targeted question. What factors should I consider when selecting clinical trial sites in Africa, especially in regions with limited healthcare infrastructure? As you can see, that builds on the previous question that we asked. Let's do that. It's building on that last question, and this is what it advises and guides us to do. In more detail, there is one last question that I'm going to ask. This wasn't pre-planned, and the idea just came to me because I like organizing things in checklists. I'll ask a question about taking these responses and creating a checklist and a framework for me. I'll pick one. Let's pick, what factors should I consider when selecting clinical trial sites in Africa, especially in regions with limited health infrastructure? And I'm speaking to the GPT right now. I'm using the audio option. I want you to provide a checklist for me for the healthcare infrastructure for clinical trials in Ghana. I want you to provide it in the form of a checklist, and I want you to help me understand some of the challenges that I'll face if I'm setting up clinical trials in clinics and hospitals in Ghana and how I can overcome them. Do you understand? As you saw, I just provided a great way to prompt, and it's asking it a question at the end. Do you understand? Other ways would be if you were a sponsor company wanting to set up for clinical trials in Ghana, how would you go about doing it based on the challenges that are being faced? It gave me a checklist, and then it also came up with the challenges that I will face and how I can actually resolve them. That is the end of this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. This tool can do so much. My hope is that as you watch these mini tutorials, you can now understand that we're really living in a completely different time. You don't have to figure things out. If you have this tool, all you have to do is go in and ask the questions that you desire regarding the regulatory and local standards for conducting clinical trials on the African continent. I have another tool that will guide you as a clinical research site to set up and manage a clinical research site anywhere. So the African Clinical Trials Navigator is at the continental, the regional, and the national level to really help you to understand how you can set up and run a trial in each country, how to submit and how to overcome those challenges. I thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next tutorial.
Thank you for watching. With the African Clinical Trials Navigator, managing trials doesn't have to be overwhelming. Ready to streamline your processes and ensure success? You can click the link below in the video description to start using the tool right away. Or visit our Linktree for more resources, training, and tools from Achibo Clinical. Let AI help you achieve excellence every step of the way. Until next time.